Action Comics 1058, Philip Kennedy Johnson writing with Rafa Sandoval on the art, in the main story at least, of course. And we'll get into all that. So, yeah, last issue was the very focused issue, which was a TV interview with the leader of the Blue Earthers.
Yep.
Right? This issue followed up. There was a cliffhanger last time, which I'll admit, when I started this issue and there was this fight between Clark and some evil Superman, I'm like, okay, I'm trying to remember if we knew who the evil Superman was, and we only kind of did. We kind of got the impression that it was her henchman dude, but there wasn't really much of an explanation as to why he looked like Superman and had all of his powers. Right. This is eventually hinted at later in this issue, but for the entirety of the fight, we just kind of have to deal with the fact that we don't know that, and Clark's having to figure out why this guy's got all of his powers. So
and why he looks like him, right? And it definitely reminded me of the Christopher Reeve Superman where he fights the evil version of himself.
And the junkyard, yeah, it's
yep.
Superman 3 is not a great movie, but goddamn, that scene's fantastic. I'll stick up for that scene every day of the week. Yep. This fight's really good though. It's really well drawn. The Sandoval art's fantastic, and ultimately Superman has to really use his wits to try and beat this guy, because his powers are depleted right now, and it's mentioned later on that they're slowly coming back, but he's still not got them fully even by the end of the issue. He uses a satellite network that Lex Luthor set up, and this was a nice bit of continuity between the two Superman books, because obviously all the Supercorp stuff, that's all been in Superman, that's not been
Action.
in
Williamson's.
So, but he's like, yeah, there's these satellites with kryptonite beams that are ready, and Superman left them up because he knows, occasionally a Zod or another Kryptonian villain might show up. There's a reason. There's a reason to have these about. So sure enough, he has them blast this fake Superman with all these kryptonite rays, which sets off the guy's heat vision, which I love this page, by the way. So it's all these green beams hitting him, but then there's another panel with the red beams coming from his eyes, shooting up through all the green beams. It's gorgeous. It's just a gorgeous, big comic booky page. But I love that this is how Clark wins the fight, because this guy's never used this heat vision before, and Clark talks about how, it is easily the most dangerous power he has in terms of control, because he had to learn how to refine it, and he especially using it in a combat situation, he had to learn to control it so well before he felt comfortable doing that. And if you run too hot, if you do it too hard, it literally would make him blind temporarily and use up all of his energy, so he'd be very weak, right?
That was a thing that I got where it was like, yeah, you think it's easy being Superman. I've had to master this stuff. It's, it really gets into, because one of the arguments I always see online about Superman is like, oh, he's too powerful. But people always forget, like, there's stories built in how Superman's had to learn to live with this type of stuff, right? And it's taken time, and there's always that talk about, when Superman fights Zod and stuff, Zod's a trained, soldier, right? But Superman can always get the edge on him because he's had the powers longer, right? So he's a little bit more...
At least in the first, in the early encounters with Zod, for sure. Because Zod, it's all new to Zod. I think... Because I always like the idea with Zod that, in a fair one-on-one fight, Zod's going to kick the shit out of him, because Zod's this trained guy. I like the idea that if you, I don't know, get some red solar energy or something and neutralize Zod down to human level, and you had Zod versus Superman without powers, Zod would absolutely kick his ass, right?
Absolutely. He's a soldier, right? He's the actual general.
This is where you bring in a Batman or someone who, obviously Zod with powers, Batman's melted, but Zod human form, okay, now you bring in Batman to fight him because he's got the fighting skills. But I like this because it is this idea that this just knocks him out because this guy has no control. He's never used these powers before, and
Superman baits him into this too, right? By hitting with the satellite, lasers and all this, and so he just opens up, and time for a nap.
Yeah, on that page where he blasts the heat vision for the first time as he's getting hit with all the kryptonite rays, the panel at the bottom of that page is showing you where these heat vision rays are hitting. They're hitting the satellite, so he's blasting all the way into the atmosphere.
Right.
Or out of the atmosphere, I should say. So that's a really fun page. And then obviously you've also got this idea that Superman, he didn't get all his powers at once. He kind of, he got to master them one at a time. So he had this sort of natural
thing. Know that from watching Smallville.
Shut up. Right? I don't want to talk about Smallville.
he covers the super breath because he has allergies, right? God, that's such a dumb episode. But yeah, but I like that that's how he does it, because he's, being that he's drained from his powers, right? Clark even says, like, I can hold him off because he's kind of raw with all of this. He's going to get overwhelmed. I just have to, get to a certain point. So I do like that Clark has the mental awareness to keep this going as long as he needs to.
And after he punches him, when his energy's been depleted, he takes off this fancy looking tech bracelet, which is what's made him Superman, effectively. So we have this piece of evidence here. But this is where, the leader of the Blue Earthers goes on TV and starts talking about how Superman, look at all this fighting and destroying buildings. She's blaming her fake Superman as if he's the real Superman,
right?
To disown Superman, to say, hey, look, he's a menace. Basically she's doing her J. Jonah Jameson. She's like,
Yep, that's what I was just gonna say. Yeah. It's early Lex and it's J. Jonah Jameson, where it's like, he's too much of a threat to be here. He's gonna bring all the troubles. Look at this.
But she flat out says, look, we believe that only aliens could harness this solar energy like Superman, but that's not true. We've got exciting things to talk about. So clearly this is this is an early example of this experiment to give humans Superman powers. So really interesting stuff. And that's the first half of the issue, but it's a really well done fight, so that takes up a lot of that. Then we have back at the Kent house, we've got the kids all coming home, and we find out that the girl and the twins get into a fight that day. And Kara, this was at the Steel, works. So
Academy.
Yeah,
right?
they were around to intervene. Kara and that intervened to stop it from going too far. But they have to do a whole big speech about how fighting's not the answer, and obviously they came from Warworld. That's all they're used to.
They're actual barbarian kids. That's how they settle things.
Just as Lois is making this point, Clark walks in the door with his suit all torn to shreds because he's clearly been in a fight for his life. I could chuckle out of that. But so I think they sneakily put in here what names these two kids are going to get as their superhero names, because Kara takes them into the room and whips out the book and talks about Nightwing and Flamebird to begin with. Talks about these house fables, these stories of these sort of heroes and mythic legends, and how the L family always talked about Nightwing and Flamebird, and obviously that's how Nightwing ended up with his name. But she brings up their family, their clan, and talks about how this goes all the way back to ancient Kryptonian history when there was two warring tribes, the Avor and Eldani tribes, if I'm saying those correctly. But mentions that their leaders who were warring with each other were called Red Sun and Starchild, and I went, that sounds like two superhero names we might give these two kids.
Right, and so we also call them the Super Twins, right? There'll be more of that in the the backups, which also reminds me of Silver Age storytelling, where Superman ends up with, you get the whole Superman Red, Superman Blue, but also the Super Twins that existed, and each one was red, one was blue. So I feel like Philip Kennedy Johnson leaning into this whole concept.
Even electric blue and red.
That's where that was pulling from, right? But so the idea that even on their House of Elcrest, right? Osol is blue, and Ultho is red. Yeah. And then we get this whole story with Red Sun and Starchild as the captains of these
What do you
tribes.
think of the choice of having Red Sun colored blue and Starchild colored red?
Yeah, that's a bit, counterintuitive.
It's like they just want to be weird for weird's sake.
Yeah, yep. So, and this is how I'm remembering now as who's who, right? Because Ultho and Osol are very difficult to remember sometimes. But I'm remembering that, Osol is close to the Azul, which is, Spanish for blue. And that tends to be what he wears. So that's how I'm remembering it. So, if he ends up being Red Sun, it's going to completely confuse me even more.
Otho's the girl. I'll just try and remember that.
Yeah.
Otho's the girl. Ozul's the boy. But I'll try my best. So this was an interesting little bit of Kryptonian lore that we're just sort of sprinkling in here.
And I like that it came from Kara, since Kara is kind of this, not a gatekeeper per se of Krypton, but she, you know, what do we say, she's the immigrant that remembers the homeland, right? So the fact that it's coming from her, not from Clark, I think is another layer on that story. Because she even said it came from the Library of Kandor.
Yeah.
So, and I like that, and that's the whole idea of Kryptonian culture. You know, Philip Kennedy Johnson's been building this and bringing up like the Phalosians.
Sounds like they were just as barbaric in the past as humans were, frankly.
Yeah, right. You know, there's you know, but just yeah, and it fits in with his kind of fantasy kind of style, like with the whole war world. There's that fantasy sheen on it. I like that he's not getting away from that. So, and more on that in a minute, because
yeah,
great moment.
So Superman says to Steel, "Hey, my powers are slowly coming back, but I'm not going to be at full strength for a while. I could maybe use some, you know, some tech to boost myself a little bit until they're back to full." And Steel just has a big grin in his face, and he's like, "Oh yeah, okay, I'm excited now." So we get that, and the main story ends with Superman getting this suit of armor and a super sword that he's going to use. I knew you'd like that.
Yeah, of course. He's the Krypton Knight, right? Like
the Krypton. It doesn't have quite a ring to it, Matt. I'm sorry.
It doesn't, but I do like it.
It's because Krypton's got 2 syllables. You have to have something with 1 syllable.
True.
You know.
But also it's a play on Kryptonite, right? He is
yeah, okay, I can see it. Yeah.
But yeah, just him going to Steel and be like, I'm gonna need something to hold me over until I can get fully charged. And Steel's like, I thought you would never ask. So just like the idea that he's had armor for Superman, right? And the idea that Superman's also kind of missing the war worldiness, right? And I can't remember his title, right? But the Unblooded Sword. So the fact that he's going to carry a sword again, I'm definitely not mad.
So the other scene that we skipped over, though, is the Blue Earther chick going back to her lair, which is very magical looking. There's a big Etrigan looking thing just kind of sitting there in the background. And then she kind of conjures up something like in a cauldron and basically has a phone call through the magic cauldron to some other beings. And yeah, interesting. But basically it talks about how she thinks that one of the Kryptonians can be turned. It can be brought over to their side. Talks about their plans a little bit. I'm curious as to which one she's talking about. Part of me was thinking, okay, one of the twins maybe makes sense because she has that temper issue. The next logical choice could maybe be someone like maybe Connor? I don't know.
Right.
But those were the first names that jumped out of my head as far as who she thinks she can turn. Not that it necessarily will, but understanding why she thinks there's a chance.
Who they're targeting, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, the whole magic aspect of her really makes sense. If she's going to be one of these, you know, people that fuses magic and technology, you know, I really like that idea for a foil for Superman.
But yeah, plus we know that Superman's one of his weaknesses other than kryptonite is magic. Magic can get in his way.
Well, and this would make sense why it was able to drain him so fast, right? It wasn't just kryptonite. There was something else at play, and the fact that it was magic or it's magic kryptonite at this point.
It also sounds like she needed some of Clark's blood to like power more of whatever her tech is, because she says, "I've bled the first of them enough to power a team of her own." So that sounds like blood of Kryptonians is actually powering whatever she's doing to give people Superman powers. So that's interesting.
But yeah, and there's always something funny to me about like these magic occult people also being the, you know, let's just say for lack of a better term, you know, I don't want to say racist because is it racist that she hates Kryptonians?
Yeah,
right? Xenophobic.
Xenophobic for sure. Yeah,
it's always funny when xenophobic, you know, people start to use occult type stuff. So just the idea that this is her thing fits in very well with, I feel like, the vibe that Philip Kennedy Johnson's been using, right? To use these as kind of reflections of modern society.
Well, I think what's interesting here is that I question if she herself is actually believing all this xenophobic stuff she says, or is she just using it as a tool to get what she wants?
I think she does believe it. That's what the whole Blue Earth movement's about, right? Is that she's about
I would have said so as well before, but now that she's like communicating with higher ups that she's reporting to, in the way she says, "Oh, soon they'll have no more use for Kryptonians, and we can begin." It sounds like the end goal is. It sounds like the Blue Earther stuff is just a means to whatever the end is that she's got planned after with these like higher uppers.
And maybe because we don't know who these shadowy people are, right? But what if they're just like these pro-human Earther types that are going to use magic, you know, to get Kryptonians out of the way so they can usher in whatever magic beings? I don't know.
I don't know. I was getting the vibe that these either could be aliens or something from another dimension. I don't know. This felt like higher up to me than just these are some Blue Earthers on Earth somewhere.
Yeah.
Doing a Skype call.
I mean, I'm fully ready for whatever Philip Kennedy Johnson reveals because there's been enough trust here.
Even just the font of the lettering kind of implies they're mystical to me.
Right, but you can also be mystical, but also be xenophobic Earth person, right? Like maybe they don't have to be from a.
You could be. I'm just like it's giving me a vibe. The vibe it's giving me is that they're something else. That they're, I don't know, aliens themselves, which would make it very ironic that she's doing a whole anti-alien thing to like do what she wants, or whatever. But either way, interesting stuff. And then the final scene is Clark getting his suit armor, which is basically just the steel suit without a mask.
Without a mask, without the headpiece, and a sword instead of a hammer. Yeah.
And arguably the cape's a bit more prominent, but I don't know if that's just because the way it's like flapping up during this final page.
It could just be the angle which we're seeing it.
So there's 2 backups in action for now. That seems to be changing in January when it goes to its new format. But we got Secret Identity Part 1 here. This is Jean Lun Yang with Victor Bogdanovich, so a reunion, and it's a new Superman story, and it's set a little bit, a little bit back. It's between action 1050 and 1051, they say. And it's basically how Keenan got integrated into the super family, where he's helping with them, and there's some jokes here about how, like, his English isn't very good, so he's saying kind of weird things. Like, he keeps referring to the super twins as nice children who I like very much. Yeah. Because he actually thinks they're little shits.
but in his hometown, he calls them the little creeps.
Yes, which later on when the translator's on and they hear that, they get very upset. But the kids think he's a spy. And it turns out they're kind of right, because he's actually been sent here by his Batman, by Bakshi, to investigate because there's a murder victim who seems to have been killed by what could be heat vision. So he's there to investigate the supers on behalf of him. Although he's come to the conclusion that he doesn't think any of them have killed this guy, but obviously they're all kind of, I think it's Connor and the twins are very kind of miffed that he's doing all this.
That he's even intimating that one of them could have done it.
And the big thing that this ends with is that he basically uses the Robin bot to deduce that the flight patterns of all these characters always seem to go to this farm in Smallville. Wait, that's owned by Clark Kent. So he realizes that Superman is Clark Kent. But then he gets seemingly an aneurysm and dies because this spell that Lex Luthor enacted so that everyone would forget, it seems to be killing anyone who remembers or figures out that Clark Kent is Superman. So the cliffhanger here is that Keenan's lying on the floor and he's dead. Obviously, he's not dead. He's going to somehow be fine by the end of the story. But
it's Keenan. He's too dumb to die. Right? That's what we've learned. Also, the guy the death that they're investigating was a reporter that was said that he had a lead on Superman's identity. So, and there was, I guess, ties back to New Superman #1, like that character being there.
Which does sound like he died the same way then, by figuring out Clark was Superman, maybe.
Right.
So. Right.
And so it's curious of what the heat vision aspect of it is, if that's just what, Lex's scheme imagined.
Yeah, I do wonder, because we're obviously going to somehow get Keenan back. I wonder if this other guy also gets saved somehow, retroactively, whether that's through time travel, magic, or just something reverses the effects.
The worst thing about this story was it made me miss New Superman, because the dynamics between Baishi and Keenan, it was something that was very welcoming.
Oh yeah. So, and Bogdanovich being on the art felt like a nice warm blanket as well. This was a nice little backup to get.
Yeah.
And I must confess, I didn't even bother reading the last backup because I had so many books to read.
Time.
Yeah.
So I read through it because it's Bibbo, right? And
I knew you would because it said Bibbo and the
Bibbo.
Super Twins, and I was like, okay, Matt's going to read it.
Yeah. So it takes place through Bibbo is watching them. We're seemingly at the Macy's Thanksgiving parade, but through Metropolis, and he is trying to show them like what human events are like. So this is what his family used to do. Every year they would go down, but because the Super Twins are so rambunctious, and because they're from Warworld, they don't understand the concept of floats and entertainment. And so, there's this float for the parade that's talking about the melting of the polar ice caps, right, and climate change. And all they hear is that it's for like the Arctic.
You said that like such a kind of American pronunciation of climate.
Climate, yeah,
not climate.
Climate change.
Climate.
Yes. And so they're like, oh, like the Arctic, like when Superman took us up to the Fortress of Solitude, but that's not what it looks like. So they use their super breath to freeze the float over, right? And then Bibbo goes to buy them hot dogs, and they decide they don't, want to be there. So they take off and they start flying around the giant balloons and the parade on the parade route, where they end up thinking that one of the someone on the parade is a bad guy, so Superman has to come in and save the day, right? And they stop and they listen to him, and eventually get the hot dogs and ask Bibbo if they can do this with him every year, which makes him shed a proud tear, because Bibbo's part of the family. And it was just a very nice little story, very much filler, right? There's some comedy in between Kat and Steve Lombard, who are doing the coverage of the floats at the beginning, where they're going back and forth, and Kat going, "I'm never doing this with you again." But yeah, again, just a lot of filler, but fun. Like it'll be a nice little break in whatever collection that they choose to throw it in. But
did the real Turbo Man show up?
No, or a Turtle Man. Yeah, not him either. or Booster, who nobody likes.
Oh yeah, no one likes Booster. All right, what are you rating Action Comics 1000?
I'm gonna give Action Comics as a whole a 9. I really enjoyed this issue.
Yeah, I am just gonna go with an 8. I think I enjoyed the main story and the backup that I read. I like what it's building to. I think the art by Sandoval. I think this in the last couple issues have been kind of some of the best stuff that he's done. I think. Really good expressive characters, nice deep inky kind of lines and stuff, which isn't just him obviously, but
right.
Yeah, I love the expansion of the Kryptonian mythology, and I liked how Clark dealt with the fight.